And in the season finale, June has survived the shooting, but she's also taken precautions against a future shooting. She's bought a bulletproof vest. The good news is she gets a visit from Mark Tuello that lets her know that they caught the gunman. He was just an angry guy with a gun, and if he has any ties to Gilead, they'll find him. June walks Mark to his car, and she asks him how he's doing, which he really appreciates because nobody seems to check in on Mark. But June knows what it's like to have people that she's responsible for that end up passing away. She says her goodbye to Mark, and then she starts looking around the neighborhood. Nothing really seems out of the ordinary until she starts walking back to her house, and that's when a truck starts to slowly follow her, making himself known that he's doing so. When June takes off running, the truck speeds up and he hits her. He then runs over her arm, breaking it, and it looks like he's about to back up on her and kill her, and that's when Luke runs outside and beats the ever-loving hell out of this guy. And it's worth noting that he had a Gilead bumper sticker, so this was absolutely targeted. They then rush June to the hospital, and Luke is trying to figure out if his wife will be okay. Looks like she will be, but he has to go talk to the police because he did assault a guy. But word of June's attack has gotten all the way to Gilead. The shooting reached Gilead, and Nick tried to talk to Commander Lawrence about it, but the way that Commander Lawrence looked at it, well, this is war, and casualties happen in war. He didn't really seem to care all that much. When Nick found out about the hit, he knew he had to take matters into his own hands. He got in touch with Mark Tuello, or Mark got in touch with him, but either way, they meet up at the border, and they come to an agreement. Mark takes Nick to the hospital to see June, who is sleeping at the time. He explains to him what happened, but also the fact that Luke is currently talking to the police, and as soon as he's done talking to the police, he will be escorted over to June's room, so there's not a whole lot of time for Nick to talk to June if he's going to do it. Mark decides to give June and Nick some privacy, and Nick just touches her hand, kisses her on the forehead, and then leaves. He then heads back to the border with Mark, and Mark makes him sign a contract for their agreement. Nick tells him, "I'll keep my end of the deal, you just keep her safe." Gilead's not going to stop. They're going to keep coming after her, and then her baby, and then her family. So I need to know that you're going to protect her. Mark reassures him that he'll do everything he can, but Nick is a little skeptical on that. He then heads back over to Gilead, where in Gilead, Aunt Lydia has a conundrum. She's been told by another one of the aunts that people have noticed she's given preferential treatment to Janine, and she needs to post her. She figures the best place to post her would be at the Lawrence's place. That way, Janine can see her baby. She first talks to Mrs. Putnam about this, and Mrs. Putnam is a little skeptical on letting Janine back in the house. She feels like she'll be laughed at for doing so, but ultimately, Aunt Lydia convinces her to give her at least a try. Aunt Lydia then goes and talks to Janine about it, but Janine really doesn't have any interest. He tells Aunt Lydia, "You told me I didn't have to do this anymore." And Aunt Lydia explains, "Well, no, I didn't say that. You do need to do it." She then starts spinning it as this is the only way to see her daughter consistently. So the next day, there's going to be the wedding of Mrs. Putnam and Commander Lawrence. And this is the first time that Mrs. Putnam and Janine are seeing each other. Mrs. Putnam lays down the law, telling Janine that the baby is actually with her parents all summer. They're going to bring Janine in, but on a trial basis, and if she behaves herself, then they'll think about letting her stay. Janine plays her part. She's very respectful, thanking Mrs. Putnam the whole way. But when Mrs. Putnam goes and takes pictures, one of the Marthas comes up to Janine and lets her know what happened to June. This completely changes Janine's entire mood. So much so that when Mrs. Putnam says to Janine, "Well, it'll be nice to have a friendly face around here," Janine snaps, telling her that they're not friends, how much she hates Mrs. Putnam, how Mrs. Putnam is an idiot for not even noticing it. It completely takes Mrs. Putnam off guard, and this awkward conversation only ends when Mrs. Putnam gets called away by Commander Lawrence. Janine is then taken back to the Handmaids barracks, and she's dressed down by Aunt Lydia. But Aunt Lydia the whole time is trying to think of a way where they can salvage this. In doing so, though, all of a sudden, a bunch of eyes come in and arrest Janine. Aunt Lydia tells the eyes, "I'm going to go talk to Commander Lawrence about this," and they let her know Commander Lawrence is the one who gave the order. And that is shocking to Aunt Lydia. There's nothing really she can do about it. She follows the eyes along with Janine out to the van, the whole time trying to plead her case until eventually the eyes push her down. They take Janine along with another Martha who was already in the van, and they take her away. But back at the Lawrence house, they continue to celebrate the wedding of Commander Lawrence and Mrs. Putnam. Nick is a little late to arrive because, he was over in Toronto visiting his girlfriend who was hit by a car, and he storms on into the house and slaps the crap out of Commander Lawrence, yelling at him, "You could have killed her." Commander Lawrence pleads his innocence, saying that it wasn't him, but it's quite a sight. Nick tries to take off. Commander Lawrence tries to play it off like no big deal, but ultimately Nick is arrested. The only person that comes to visit him is Rose, and she basically lets him know it's over. I can't be with you because you clearly don't love me. If you did love me, you wouldn't drop everything every time your girlfriend calls and to go run to her. Ultimately, Rose just doesn't understand, and Nick has a really hard time explaining the situation, but Nick is left alone. The next day, June is discharged. She gets to go home, and her and Luke have a conversation about what they're going to do to protect themselves. It's pretty clear they're really not safe anymore in Toronto. Everybody hates refugees, and it's got Luke carrying around a gun. June then lays down to get some rest, but when she wakes up, she does so to a bunch of commotion. And the commotion is because the guy that Luke beat up, the same guy that hit June, well, he died, which means that Luke is going to be arrested because Luke killed a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil, and he's just a refugee. Everybody's kind of freaking out, trying to figure out what to do, until finally June says, "We need to run. Look, we waited way too long in Boston until it was too late. We couldn't run. We need to get out of here now. The country isn't what it was. They don't want us here. We need to leave." And this speech ends up working. Moira and Rita help June and Luke pack up things, and they start putting stuff in their car to get the hell out of there and get to the airport, with plans on going to Hawaii. But as they're doing so, they get stopped by Mark Tuello in their driveway. He tells them that Luke's name is going to be flagged as soon as they get to the airport, so it's stupid to go there. There's no point. But the American government is shuttling out refugees and sending them out west. They're doing so on trains, and he can get them on one of those trains. So they agree. Mark drives them to the train station, drops them off, gives them new visas because as soon as they see Luke Bankhold, they're going to arrest them, and he sends them on their way. But right before she leaves, June tells Mark, "Send a message to Nick. Tell him that I'm safe. I'll be okay." June and Luke then head into the train station, and it's a scene that looks a lot like when they were trying to leave Boston. A lot of people trying to get the hell out of Dodge, overcrowdedness, and just fear. But when they reach the train, Luke tells June, "Go ahead, because if they catch me with you, they're going to arrest all of us. So you go ahead, and I'll try to get on this train without them noticing me." June is very hesitant to do so, but ultimately she does. She goes ahead, she gives her ID, and she's waiting by the train for Luke. But then she starts hearing police asking other people if they know of Luke Bankhold, if they've seen him before. And she knows it's going to be really hard for him to get on that train. She calls him up and tells him that he's got to come now, but he says no. "June, you're not safe with me, and you're not safe in Toronto. So you need to get on that train and go. Take Nicole, go out west. We found each other before, we'll find each other again." June then realizes that this was Luke's plan all along. He was never going to get on the train, but he was making the sacrifice to protect June and Nicole. Ultimately, he calls over the police, and they arrest him, and June gets on the train. She then starts looking around, figuring out where she's going to sit, and she hears another baby crying, and that baby is Noah, Serena's baby, because Serena is also on the train. The two women have a little bit of an awkward hello, but you figure they're going to be talking a lot because they're on this train ride for a long time together. And that is the end of Season 5 of The Handmaid's Tale. Thank you so much for getting to this point. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. I have a Patreon. I have merch. I have shirts. I have memberships. I have all that. Buy it. Don't. I don't care. But thanks for watching.